The mop handle is worn smooth from years of the same grip. I know every board in this floor, which one creaks near the east wall, which one catches a wheel on the equipment cart. I've been coming in at 5:15 in the morning for 3 years, before the lights go up, before the first student rolls in with their gear bag and their ambition. I clean what they leave behind, I fix what they break, I stay out of the way. That was the arrangement, I understood it. Harlan Peak Academy. That's what the frosted glass says above the entrance. Gold letters on charcoal. Director Nora Ashby built it into the best martial arts facility in the state. 3 floors, a competition floor, a showcase hall, changing rooms that smell like cedar and new rubber. My late wife used to joke that the place had more square footage than our apartment building. She wasn't wrong. I took the custodian position 8 months after she passed. Eli was 2 years old. I needed steady hours and a reason to be somewhere every morning, and the job gave me both. What I didn't tell anyone, what I never told anyone, was that I had spent the better part of my life in rooms like this one, not mopping them, learning in them. My father ran a small school on the south side for 31 years. He taught in a converted garage with a cracked concrete floor and a calendar on the wall that was always 2 years out of date. But what he taught was real. What he gave me, in 20 years of early mornings before school and late evenings after, was the complete vocabulary of a system he'd spent his whole life refining. When he passed, 6 years ago, the system went with him, or so everyone assumed. I let them assume it. I had Eli to raise. The mornings were for the mop and the cart and the 5:15 commute. The evenings, after Eli was asleep, were for me. In the back corner of the storage room on the second floor, where the broken equipment goes to wait for repair, I practiced. Every night, the same forms my father taught me, in the same order, with the same exacting attention he demanded. Not because anyone was watching, because it was the only way I knew to keep him close. Nobody at the academy knew any of this. Why would they? The trouble started on a Tuesday in October, when Director Ashby brought in a new head instructor. His name was Marcus Gould. He had competition credentials, a sharp haircut, and the manner of a man who checks whether you're worth talking to before he decides to speak. I watched him walk the facility on his first morning, running a finger along the equipment rail, testing the spring on the floor panels, nodding at things that didn't need nodding at. He had that quality some people carry, the certainty that every room is waiting for their opinion. I was wheeling the cart past the main training floor when he stopped me. I didn't see it coming. I had my head down, working on a schedule in my mind. There was a leaking valve on the second floor water fountain and a torn floor panel near Station 4 that needed replacing before the weekend. He stepped directly into my path, and I pulled up short, and he looked at the cart, and then at me, with an expression I'd seen before. Not cruelty, something worse, incuriosity. You the facilities guy? Yes, sir. He glanced past me at the training floor. I've got students in here from 6:30. I don't want equipment carts on the floor during session hours. And I don't want, he paused, looking for the word, maintenance personnel moving through the space while we're working. It breaks the focus. I'm usually done before 6, I said. Make it 5:30, and stay off my mat. He said that last part, the way you'd say it to a dog. Not unkind, exactly, just very certain that the boundary existed and that I understood my side of it. Eli was standing at the end of the hall. He'd walked over from the before-school program 2 buildings down, something he did some mornings when he had 10 minutes, just to watch through the hallway window. He was 10 years old, and he loved martial arts the way some boys love cars or baseball, completely, without reason, from somewhere deeper than logic. We couldn't afford the tuition. I'd looked at it 3 times and done the math 3 times, and it came out the same every time. But he liked to watch, so I let him watch. He'd heard all of it. He had his backpack on, and his shoes untied, and he was looking at his sneakers like they were the most interesting things in the building. I collected the cart and rolled it toward the supply corridor, and didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say that was going to help either of us. He fell into step beside me for about 30 feet, and then he said, "He was kind of rude to you, Dad." "He's got a job to do," I said. "So do you." "That's right, so do I." He went back to the before-school program. I went to fix the valve. The days went on. I moved my start time to 5. I learned Gould's schedule the way I'd learned the floor, which boards he walked on, where his attention went, what he cared about. He cared about the competition students. He cared about the showcase. The annual showcase was in 48 hours, a public demonstration, the Academy's most visible event, the one that filled the seats and brought in new families, and mattered to Director Ashby more than almost anything on the calendar. The centerpiece was a solo form, a long, demanding sequence performed by the Academy's most advanced student, a young man named Rourke who had been training here for 6 years. I heard about Rourke's injury the way I hear most things, through a half-open door. I was in the supply closet off the East Corridor, inventorying the cleaning stock, when Director Ashby and Marcus Gould came down the hall and stopped just outside. She was talking in a voice I hadn't heard from her before, still measured, still composed, but with something compressed inside it. Rourke had torn a ligament in his knee at practice that afternoon. He was out. The showcase was in 48 hours, and the centerpiece had no performer. I heard Gould go through his list. The second-best student could handle the opening sequence, but not the centerpiece form. Too complex, too exposed. The demonstration team could fill with group work, but it wasn't the same. They could cut the solo entirely and restructure, but that would be visible to anyone who'd attended before. He ran through it methodically. None of it solved the problem. Director Ashby said, "There has to be a way." He said, "I'll keep working on it." Their footsteps moved off down the hall. I stood with the inventory clipboard in my hand, and I thought about my father. I thought about the form he spent 15 years perfecting, the one he said was too long for competition, but right for demonstration, built for an audience, built to show what the system was actually capable of at its full expression. The one he taught me last, when I was 22 years old, and made me learn until I could do it without thinking, without counting, without anything between the movement and me. I finished the inventory. I went back to work. At closing time, 8:45, after the last student had gone, and Gould had locked his office, and the building had settled into quiet, I took off my jacket and my work boots, and I walked out onto the training floor in my socks. I stood in the center for a moment. The floor was good, better than my father's concrete, softer underfoot, the kind of floor that gives you something back. The overhead lights were down to half, the way they leave them at night, and the room had that particular quality of empty gyms in the evening, a held breath. I found my starting position without thinking about it. Feet shoulder width, weight even, hands at my sides, chin level, the same way my father showed me, the same way he always started. I began. I don't know exactly how long it runs. My father said 22 minutes when he was young and faster, and longer now that he understood what it was actually asking. For me, it has always been somewhere in between, long enough to require everything, short enough to leave you wanting the beginning again. I wasn't halfway through when I realized I wasn't alone. Director Ashby was standing in the doorway of her office on the upper level. She was still in her work clothes, the dark blazer she'd been wearing all day, and she had a folder in her hands that she wasn't looking at anymore. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't read from the floor, still, very still. I finished the form. I came back to the starting position. I stood. The building was quiet. Somewhere on the floor above, the ventilation clicked on. Director Ashby walked down the stairs. She crossed the floor and stopped about 10 feet from me and looked at me with the careful attention of someone who is making sure they saw what they think they saw. "Where did you learn that?" she said. "My father." "What was his name?" I told her. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He founded this academy." "Yes, ma'am." She looked at the floor between us. Then she looked back up. "He taught you the full sequence." "He taught me everything he knew." She called Marcus Gould at 9 o'clock that night. I don't know exactly what she said, but I know he was in the building by 9:30, because I was still finishing the equipment check when I heard his footsteps in the hall. He came to the doorway of the training floor and found me there, my jacket back on, the mop standing in its bucket by the east wall. He looked at me for a long time without speaking. "She wants you to lead the demonstration," he finally said. "I know. You've been here 3 years." "Yes." He seemed to be working through something. Not an apology. Not quite. But something in that neighborhood. "I didn't know who you were." "Most people don't," I said. "It's all right." It wasn't all of it, but it was enough. I had one condition. I told Director Ashby the next morning. in her office with the early light coming through the east windows. My son was 10 years old. He wanted to learn. I couldn't pay the tuition, and I wasn't going to ask for charity. But if the academy was going to have me on that floor, I wanted Eli to have a place in it. No fee, no strings, starting with the next session. She didn't hesitate. The showcase was on a Friday evening. The hall seated 200 people. I wore my father's practice clothes, a set of dark blue he'd given me the year before he died, still pressed, still folded the way he folded them. Eli sat in the front row with a borrowed seat cushion and his shoes finely tied, and he watched me the way my father used to watch me, completely, without blinking, like he was trying to memorize every movement before it was over. I stood in the center of the floor, and I found the starting position, and I thought about my father's garage on the south side, and the cracked concrete, and the calendar that was always 2 years out of date. I thought about 20 years of early mornings, and the particular feeling of a form going right, not performing it right, but living inside it, when the movement stops being something you're doing and becomes something you're simply part of. I began. 200 people in a silent room, and for 22 minutes there was nothing in it but the form and what my father had made of his life and what he'd passed on to mine. When I came back to the starting position and went still, the silence held for a full 3 seconds before the room came up. Eli was on his feet. He had his hands pressed flat together in front of his chest, and he was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Not pride exactly. Something older than that. Something that sat behind the eyes. Recognition, maybe. Like he'd just understood something that had been there all along. I looked at him across the room and I thought, your grandfather's hands. You've got your grandfather's hands. Marcus Gould was standing at the back. He wasn't clapping. He was just standing there with his arms at his sides and a look on his face that I understood. The look of a man who has seen something he didn't know existed until 30 seconds ago. He caught my eye for a moment and gave me a small nod. Not an apology. Not quite. But close enough that I nodded back. Director Ashby shook my hand afterward and said, he'd be proud. I said, I know. Eli found me at the edge of the floor, with the empty seats emptying behind him, his borrowed cushion under one arm, and he said, Dad, that was you. That was your grandfather, I told him. I was just carrying it. He thought about that. Then he said, can you teach me? That's what the condition was for, I said. He took my hand, something he hadn't done in public in about a year, on account of being 10, and he held it for the walk out of the building and into the cool October air. The gold letters on the frosted glass caught the parking lot light as we passed. I thought about my father's name on the wall inside. I thought about the cracked concrete floor and the calendar. I thought about 20 years of dark mornings in a storage room with nobody watching. Nobody, and all of it.